And welcome. Raising Your Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking all things inner game. Tuesdays are for sports and sports parenting. Fridays are for everything and everyone. First thing, I want to say sorry for not being with you last week. We were out of town on another college tour trip. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But I missed last Friday's pod, and I'm sorry about that. I know with the pods I listen to, I always feel disappointed and sort of mad at them when they take a break. I actually come to rely on them in a way, and I really miss it when they're off. So I hope you weren't too bothered by it. Anyway, my apologies. Glad to be back. So how are you today? How are things with your inner game? Are you feeling good or feeling stressed out, worried? What's going on for you? For me, I will say a little rough. I think I have a cold. Maybe you can hear that. I got a sore throat, scratchy voice. My lungs are a little heavy. Maybe a fever, maybe not. You know how that goes. You can't totally tell. A little extra tired. It's not super bad, but it is a bit of a noticeable drag, and probably the main thing I'm noticing right now. Speaking of being a drag, I was still getting back in the groove after our trip last week, so it's especially disappointing to be delayed in that, but we'll see how it goes. So, some things to talk about today. My ups and downs for the week. Clear thinking as opposed to motivated reasoning and delusion. The E. Jean Carroll trial, some thoughts on that. How to control our thoughts and learn to let go of things. Some investment wisdom and guidance, especially for teens. A nice self-care challenge. And our recommended items this week. We do have some new ones this week. So I'll start with my ups and downs. What things were lifting me up this past week and what things were pulling me down, making life harder. In the ups column for me this week, the big thing was our college trip I mentioned. So it's been almost 2 weeks now. We flew out to Boston on Tuesday, drove to Northampton, Massachusetts, a couple hours up there, 2 nights there, drove to Syracuse, 1 night there, drove to New York City, 1 night there, then back to Boston and home last Saturday. So this was obviously both ups and downs because that travel was pretty brutal. Probably 20 hours of driving over the 4 days plus the flights. I did all the driving because of the rental car agreement. We drove into New York City Friday morning. That's always an iffy thing to do. It's quite an adventure. Travel just in general has gotten more and more taxing for me as I've gotten older, I guess. Now, to be fair, every part of this trip went as well as it could. There's a little bit of hard driving in the rain on Friday, but other than that, everything was on time, as expected, no issues, no problems, and still pretty taxing. But those are the downs. The ups were great. First, in Northampton, we stayed with friends we hadn't seen in at least 6 years, and we just love them. They are the best. Northampton is beautiful. Also, it turns out that Peter is going to be going to college right next door there at UMass Amherst, so that's going to be great for all of us. Then we got to visit another dear friend, Kim John Payne, the Simplicity Parenting author, at his beautiful farm in Ashfield, about a half hour north. I haven't seen Kim in person for probably 8 years, even though we were working together all that time. Had never seen the farm. That was great. We had a lovely dinner with him and his wife, Catherine. And just to give you an idea of how special that was, we went there directly from our UMass tour. We were all just tapped out and saying how, gosh, really would love to go rest now. Not looking forward to having to be in guest mode and all that. But by the time we left their place after dinner, we felt totally refreshed and energized. It was really something. So that was excellent. Next day, nothing really special. We did enjoy Syracuse enough, had a great lunch there. But then Friday, New York City, which was also Peter's 18th birthday. And the whole trip really was a birthday gift to him because he loved New York. And it was just an amazing, full, and also sort of exhausting day. But he really loved it. Got some great shopping in, felt good about his outfit, which is something he's into now, fashion. We took a long walk through Central Park, went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which was amazing. Took a taxi to dinner with our nephew, and also he's Peter's cousin who lives there. He's going to NYU. That was really fun, though a little bit more expensive than we're used to dining in New York City. My goodness. Wow. But that was still a beautiful thing, the whole dinner, the whole thing. And overall, it was just great. We all loved it. I'm still not all the way back, as I mentioned, especially with this cold. But overall, just incredible, special time. So those were my ups and downs this week. Next up, our quote of the week. All right, our quote of the week. This week, we'll hear from Richard Feynman. I think that's how you pronounce it, Feynman. Possible some say Feynman. Anyway, I'm going with Feynman. Richard Feynman was just a fascinating genius of a character. He's a physicist, a Nobel Prize winner, worked on the original atomic bomb project, considered one of the greatest physicists of all time. And just remembering this book from him, too, that I loved so much. It's I think it's an autobiography. It's called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, Adventures of a Curious Character, which by itself gives you a feel for him. Just a crazy, interesting guy. Anyway, his quote is, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. There are many ways to think about this idea of fooling ourselves, but the one I'm interested in today is doing it on purpose, motivated reasoning, willful blindness. We've touched on this now and then when we talk about tribalism, how bad things have gotten with that in our society, and how our need to belong in a group, our need for identity, can override our commitment to honesty and truth and facts and clear thinking. When we claim a moral position, for example, saying this or that behavior is clearly wrong, but then say, well, it's fine when our side does it. That's motivated reasoning, right? And it's not really reasoning at all. There's no logic or integrity in it. It's just basically lying to make ourselves feel better. And again, there are many other ways we fool ourselves, but that's a particularly important and dangerous one for our times. And so the way to avoid it is to learn the skills we teach in the Sports Academy and in the book, Raise Your Inner Game. Motivated reasoning is driven by our lower selves, our fears, our survival impulses, our negative emotions. But as soon as we learn to separate ourselves from those and reconnect with our real higher self, we start to see things clearly again. So that's why I'm thinking about this quote this week. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. There's far too much of that going on in our world right now, and I am just thankful for everyone who's doing the work of resisting that pull. All right, that's it this week's quote. That is it for this week's quote. Now we'll move on to top stories. Okay, top stories. This week, I want to say a bit about the E. Jean Carroll trial going on in New York. I mean, I don't really want to talk about it, honestly. It's an uncomfortable subject. You probably know Donald Trump is on trial for defamation and indirectly for rape of E. Jean Carroll many years ago. It's just disturbing on many levels. But it's pretty clear. And Trump himself said it was true on that famous Access Hollywood tape from 2016 that he simply is a serial sexual offender. I mean, there's really no doubt about that. Again, the behavior he's accused of here is exactly what he himself said he does with women. And he was bragging about it. So that's horrible enough all by itself. But the thing I can't get over is that it doesn't matter to so many people. They don't care. They don't think it is disqualifying for being president. Somehow, given all that, they find a way to justify supporting him. So the theme today is motivated reasoning, right? What better example is there of that than this? If you ask someone, and I honestly believe basically anyone, if you ask them, do you think someone who is guilty of this kind of abusive behavior deserves our respect and is fit to be president? They would say, no, of course not. It's ridiculous. But here we are. Millions of people know everything about him, and they still support him. That is motivated reasoning at its worst. Now, I want to clarify that a little bit. We probably shouldn't call it motivated reasoning because that sounds like there is still an element of reason involved. But that's not actually true. It's not motivated reasoning. It's a willful abandoning of reason. They will say things as explanation. Words will come out of their mouths, but they don't make sense. They're not consistent or logical. They're not supported by facts. It's not reason. It's lying to themselves and to us in order to either be accepted into their group or to retain power, or maybe both. Now, there's another level to this, which is actual delusion. I heard a guy the other day on video. Honest to God, young guy, seemed intelligent, articulate enough, polite even. He was being interviewed, and he said he actually believes, among many other things, he's a QAnon follower, but he actually believes, no joke, that Joe Biden was murdered several years ago and is now being played by actors, among them possibly Jim Carrey. He believes that JFK Jr., who died in a plane crash in 1999, over 30 years ago, is actually alive, in hiding, and will soon reappear to become Donald Trump's vice president when he reclaims office. Actually believes all of that. And he's so sure and self-confident in it, and almost feels sorry for the interviewer who doesn't have the information he does, who is falling for the fiction the media is telling us. That is remarkable. And that is actual clinical delusion. But it's a close cousin to motivated reasoning. And they're both a real problem that we need to learn to deal with. A couple of episodes ago, I mentioned a book I was worried about because there was a core piece of the material that sounded way too much like the framework in Raise Your Inner Game. Well, I finished the book. I'm not worried about that anymore. But he has a very helpful observation in there that goes right to this question of how to deal with this. He says we shouldn't only think about the left-right political spectrum on one dimension, meaning it's not really just far left and far right along the straight line. It's more of a four-quadrant model with upper and lower left and right. Upper is people who have strong opinions on a subject but are still interested in exploring things rationally. They care about facts and reason and consistency and integrity. And when they debate a subject, they can, at least theoretically, change their opinion given new persuasive information. People on the lower left and right cannot change their opinion. They're not interested in that. They're not open to discussion. It's all motivated tribal reasoning. So that's an important insight because what it tells us is that we can't deal with upper and lower partisans in the same way. For people in the upper quadrants, we talk, we debate, we work things through, we come to understanding. With people in the lower quadrants, that doesn't work. They're never going to play by those rules. They're never going to listen to reason. So the only approach that works with them is to keep them from gaining power, which normally works fine because they're, by definition, in the minority. But that brings us back to the danger of our gerrymandered system I talked about a couple weeks ago. Because that system opens a path for minority rule. And when you open up a chance for lower quadrant people to be in power, that is truly dangerous. That's when you get dictators and fascism. One last point. I am, and probably no surprise, fully on the left of the political spectrum. I would think of it as the mainstream left. No doubt about that. I could not be more opposed to the ideas on the right. But I'm also on the upper left. I like discussing things and looking for common understanding. When it comes to the upper-lower divide, I am just as concerned about the lower left as I am the lower right. They're equally dangerous, in my view, and I don't want to live in a country controlled by either, because again, it's not going to be a democracy. It's going to be an authoritarian shit show. So anyway, that's happy stuff. Sorry about that. But that's what I'm thinking about this week, this unbelievable wave of motivated reasoning and delusion that's threatening the very foundations of our system. And more important, how can we break that spell and start to get back to where things make sense and we value clear thinking and reason and discussion and agreement and all of that. All right, that's the news for me this week. Next up, Inner Game Gold. All right, Inner Game Gold. These are the ideas and concepts I come back to over and over to help me stay on track. This week, I have another new one I want to share. It sort of continues the theme of managing our thoughts. So this one, as I understand it, is an old Zen koan. Basically, it's a story that's meant to help us click into seeing how the mental game really works, and then, of course, help us gain control over it. So the story goes, there were two monks walking together. At some point, they came upon a beautiful young woman who was asking for help crossing a stream. So one of the monks helpfully agreed to pick her up and carry her across. And then he set her back down, wished her well, and the monks continued on their way. They walked in silence for a long time until finally the second monk said, "I can't believe you carried that woman across that stream. You know we're forbidden to touch women. Why would you do such a thing?" And the first monk replied, "Brother, I set her down back there. Why are you still carrying her?" Oh, I just love that. I love how it tricks you into looking at it from a different angle, shifting you from the question itself to the nature of thought, right? Normally, we pay attention to the questions in our head. We hear them come up, we engage with them, and, truthfully, that's where we spend most of our time, going back and forth in our head with the thoughts and images that come up. But the more important observation is to see that process in action. You're still carrying her. You are stuck in your head. That's not what Zen monks are supposed to do. That's not what we're learning. That's not how athletes perform at their best. We are at our best when we're fully present and engaged in the moment. The key to doing that is to learn to break the cycle of our automatic, unconscious thinking and get out of our head. So this little story helps us see that and reminds us how it all works. It's just lovely. So I hope you enjoy that. I hope you keep it around and revisit it from time to time like I do, because I think you'll find it very helpful. All right, that's our Inner Game Gold this week. Next up, raise your outer game. All right, raise your outer game. This, of course, is where we talk about things that we care about in our outer life, our health, our relationship, and our finances. And this week, I want to talk about finances, about money, specifically investing, safe investing, smart investing, and investing for kids. And this is actually going to be a very short segment. I heard a story the other day about a bet made by Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, you probably know, arguably the most successful investor of all time. So the story goes, Warren Buffett made a $1 million bet back in 2008 that, taking into account fees, costs, expenses, all of that stuff, an S&P 500 index fund would outperform a hedge fund over 10 years' time. $1 million, he won the bet. Now, there were ups and downs during that time, times when he was behind, but over the 10 years, he was right, and over a longer time frame, even more right. A basic index fund beats even the best, most elite managed funds over the long term. So that's the lesson. The safest, smartest investment you can make over time is a basic whole market index fund. And now with the rise of ETFs, which are just lower cost funds, it's even more true. Our kids who are starting to invest a little bit here and there using the Greenlight card, by the way, I think I've talked about that before. It's a service that gives kids their own debit cards, helps them learn about managing their money and all that. We've loved that over the years. And you can also set up investments through the card, and they both have an index fund, an S&P 500 ETF fund now. I think it's called VOO from Vanguard. Anyway, that is it, especially for kids. Hammer home for them this basic lesson. Start investing early, get an S&P index fund with the lowest fees possible, add to it consistently, and just keep doing it and be patient. It takes basically no brain power, no bandwidth. It's just one decision, no worry, and over time. You can't do any better. Now, for the disclaimer, I'm not an investing expert or advisor. This is not official investing advice. Do your own research. Talk to your own advisor. Make your own investments. This is just one person's experience and opinion, okay? All right, next up, our Charging Station Challenge. All right, our Charging Station Challenge. So the last couple of weeks, we had you doing the No Daily News Challenge. That's a tough one, but also a great one. I hope you enjoyed that. This week, in the spirit of my cold and taking care of myself, I want you to identify and do some self-care. Maybe it's a nap when you need it. Maybe it's a massage. Maybe it's a long soak in the tub or a cup of tea by the fireplace. Whatever you do or whatever you would do to take care of yourself in those times when you feel like you need a little extra care, that's what I want you to do. At least once this week, take some intentional care of yourself. And then, of course, let us know what you did in the community and how it went. If you're not in the community yet, click the link in the notes. It's free. You just register, get right into the challenge. We'd love to hear from you. And that's it for this week's Charging Station Challenge. Next up, highly recommended. Okay, highly recommended. These are the things I'm crazy about right now, or even just interested in talking about. Books, shows, gadgets, stuff like that. So this week we got a few new items. The first is a new show I started watching just this week. It's called White House Plumbers on HBO Max. So this is a dark comedy about the guys who did all the illegal stuff around Watergate back in the 70s. Woody Harrelson is the main star. He plays Howard Hunt. His partner, I don't remember the actor's name, but he's playing a hilarious G. Gordon Liddy, who's such a strange person. There's John Dean, the lawyer, Mark Felt, just the whole cast of characters. And for some reason, I just really enjoyed it. Partly, maybe because I was around then, I kind of remember a lot of it, you know. I also enjoy period pieces like that, and this is great for that. It just pulls you right back into that time. The acting is great so far. It's funny. Just really enjoying it. Highly recommended. Though, to be fair, I've only watched one episode. Also, a new book this week. John Sanford is one of my favorite authors for thrillers. Two of his ongoing characters are my all-time favorites. They're both set in Minnesota. Virgil Flowers is one of them. Lucas Davenport is the other. Just great. Always enjoy those. Always get them as soon as they come out. So he has a new series. This is the second book in this one, with Davenport's daughter. Her name is Letty Davenport. She's also an investigator, like her father. She is super badass, which is fun. The books are just great entertainment for me. And I'm just a little ways into this one too, just starting out, but I'm already really enjoying it and happy to recommend it. The book's called Dark Angel, which gives you some idea of the vibe there. So I'm recommending that one too. I would also put a link to the Richard Feynman book I mentioned in the notes, because that is just a great book. Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman. By the way, I finished the self-defense book I mentioned a while ago, The Gift of Violence. I didn't actually love that. It was too long, I thought. There were a couple of points I was happy to hear, and I actually shared with my family. I thought they were helpful. So there's definitely some value in there, but it could have been a lot shorter, in my opinion, and more practical. Anyway, I wanted to close the loop on that. So that is highly recommended for this week, and that's it for this week's show. If you like what you heard, please do tell your friends, invite them to join us, and rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help more people find the show and get the mental game boost we all need. If you have teenagers in sports, check out our mental game starter kit. It's a great set of resources to help get you started on the path of helping your child boost their mental game. And my goodness, what a difference it makes. You can go to raiseyourinnergame.com, scroll to the bottom, learn about it, register there. All free, of course. Super helpful resources. If you'd like to support the show so we can keep things ad-free, please click the Buy Me a Coffee link below, and thank you for that. For more mental game goodness, please join our free community, the Raise Your Inner Game Charging Station. There's a link here, of course, totally free. I'm sure you'll love that. If you're listening to this on audio, but you like video, we post all our episodes on our YouTube channel as well. There's a link to that in the show notes. And we will close, as we always do, with Leo Tolstoy, again from the Raise Your Inner Game book. The ultimate purpose in life is to serve humanity. That's what we're doing. We're serving the people in our lives, It's super important. So keep up the good work, and we'll see you next time.